Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem. Great to have you with us for a special Israel First update with myself, Martin Blackham, and with my wife, Natalie Blackham. We are the program that looks at the news. We have interviews and features from Israel, and we also have teaching from Hebrew. And in the news, in the newspaper today, and bear in mind this is when we've just come into the studio, it's got this is the Jerusalem Post. We're going to be looking at the Jerusalem Post, the New York Times and Haaretz, all with the same story. This is the Jerusalem Post. It says, Trump, after historic summit, Kim made unwavering commitment towards denuclearization. In other words, the removal of nuclear testing, nuclear weapons, etc. That's the Jerusalem Post. The New York Times says, Trump says arms cuts by North Korea to start soon. This is the New York Times. And then we've got Haaretz, the other English newspaper in Israel. There's 3 English newspapers in speaking papers in Israel. And this says, Kim, Trump, no nukes in Korean Peninsula. And that's the headlines from the Haaretz newspaper in Israel. So really historic development, Natalie. Just to show you how big a development is, particularly for Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulates President Donald Trump after his summit with the North Korean leader Kim Jong and said Washington's policy on Iran was also succeeding. Netanyahu said, I commend US President Donald Trump on this historic summit in Singapore. Netanyahu said in a statement, this is an important step in the effort to get rid of the Korean Peninsula of nuclear weapons. So, Natalie, and for you at home, why is it so important, this big meeting between, featured in the Jerusalem Post, why is this historic meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un? Why is it so important for Israel? And why is it on the headlines of the Jerusalem Post? Well, let me tell you a story and you'll understand. Newsweek said that a Hamas engineer, Hamas is the terrorist organization that controls the Gaza Strip, recently negotiated with a North Korean arms dealer. Palestinian engineer in Kuala Lumpur. Kuala Lumpur is the capital of Malaysia, who is an expert in drone warfare, helped negotiate deals to smuggle North Korean weapons into Gaza for the use by Hamas. So why is it so important? It's because, very simply, that North Korea was a rogue state who was supplying weapons to terrorists, and Hamas, and indeed I think even Hezbollah in Lebanon, were being supplied by North Korea. They were trying to smuggle weapons for many, many years into the Gaza Strip. So this is why this is so important, because if this state is brought into the fold of world nations, you can imagine now that the terrorists will have less and less places they can obtain their weapons. And they've been not just weapons, but technology, weapon technology. In other words, rocket guidance, missile systems. Many rockets have been fired into Israel. Indeed, that's the main threat from both Gaza in the south of Israel and Lebanon and Syria in the north. And so, and this guy who was in Malaysia was a drone warfare expert. So really an historic meeting and something of world magnitude, Natalie.
This is interesting when you say that, because so many things is changing right now. And I'm reading a very good book, Jonathan Sachs, Not in God's Name. And he has amazing ideas, and it generates new ideas in your mind and see what's happening in the Middle East and looking at the history. And one thing is said there, weapons win wars, but it takes ideas to win peace. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, I was like, exactly, and it's exactly what's happening. It's like they are able not to have war by using ideas to be able to bring peace. So it's just extraordinary when you see what's happening now. And again, it's interesting with what you are saying, because we are reading, I was looking at the news, and Netanyahu has been in Germany, and he went to France, and he went to England. And I was listening to what he was saying and what also Merkel was saying and Macron and also May. And it's interesting to hear, I mean, obviously Netanyahu is always speaking about Iran. We spoke about that last time when we had a program together about that they disclose all the things that Iran has, and we know that is for warfare. But now he's saying, okay, please, and he's speaking to all the nations, look what's happening. And again, he went to Germany, France, and England to speak about that. But he said, I can see now things moving. And like we can see, because of Iran, there is some Arabic countries now who are not happy, and you have the Shiite from Iran and you have the Sunni from other Arabic countries. And so there is a shift happening, and he say, we can see all these things, we need to work against the war that they want to have. They say, I can start to see a road of reconciliation. I don't know if he used this word, but he say, I can really see hope in what's happening now, because there is a willingness for people to communicate together.
And you've been, it's been the anniversary of the Six-Day War.
Yes.
And you've been reading about the Six-Day War and learning. So what anniversary is it?
So this is the
51st anniversary.
That's the first anniversary of the Six-Day War. Last year it was the big 50. But what is very important right now to see is sometimes we have a big miracle in front of your eyes, and it's so big that you don't even see it. And in 1967, we had the biggest miracle in front of our eyes, and so I'm going to tell you about it a bit now.
And if the viewers, if you would like to get this book, this is from Israel 365.
Yes. This is Israel 365, and so it's really, they make it as a Megillah because it's a so amazing story. That
What's
is
a
almost
Megillah,
like,
by the way?
Megillah is the story, explanation of what's happened. Like Esther, the Purim story is called a Megillah. It's part of the Bible, but it's called a Megillah. And
so a Megillah is a story.
Yeah, and is what is. This is like the new Megillah of our miracles in the Bible, that we could almost like add this book.
Of the Six-Day War.
Of the Six-Day War, exactly. And I was reading again, and they were saying the Six-Day War. First of all, when you speak about war, usually you have the 100-year war.
100-year war.
You have the 30 years war. It's not days.
No.
Okay. So first
even
of
recently
all,
with Afghanistan and Iraq has been measured in terms of years, not days.
Yes. So this is the biggest miracle, that in 6 days, all these things happen. And not only that, the first 6 hours was decisive for Israel, because they were daring to attack the Air Force of Egypt, okay? So they dared to do that.
They didn't do that just because they were not happy.
No, they knew that they were coming.
They had intelligence.
Yes.
What happened was that Israel is surrounded by Arab nations, and they got intelligence that Egypt, or the Egyptian Air Force, was planning to carry out.
No, they could see it, because the UNIFIL, like the United Nations army, was in the Sinai. Egypt said, go away. They pushed them away. There was a lot of things. There was the army coming. I mean, they knew that all these things was happening. They had like 3 weeks between the Day of Independence and the beginning of the war. A lot of Israelis were leaving the country because they weren't sure of what will happen. It was the most terrifying time that they had here in Israel, okay? Terrifying. To tell you, like the army, they were going not only to look at the cemeteries, they were going into parks to see how they are going to get the body ready for
to make a cemetery.
Yeah, to make cemeteries, because they saw that they will have so many people who will die. Okay, I think it was 100,000 they said that it will die. You know how many die? Under 800.
Wow.
So even the people in Israel were saying, we can see God's finger, because we've done our best, but we couldn't do that. when the Air Force went to Egypt, there was no alarm. They didn't hear anything. So they've done the first wave, and they got about 100 aeroplanes, and went back home, and they said, okay, we can do another time because we know that they have again 100 that they can come against us. So they went again for a row, and they again attack and destroy more aeroplanes. Then Jordan the next day was going to war, and so they had to attack. They did not want that, and they didn't even think that this will happen. But I'll tell you what Ezer Weizmann, so he was the Israeli Air Force, and he was the head of the operation during the war, and this is what he said. All he could think of was a verse from the Bible, in which Pharaoh's greatest sorcerers and advisors submitted to a metaphysical explanation of the plague. It is the finger of God. And he can only think about that. And there was the chief of staff also, Yitzhak Rabin, and he was saying, he used a message in the telegram, and he said, this is the day that Hashem made, we shall exult and rejoice in it. Because it was just like, they knew they couldn't make it by themselves, and they did. This was a war when, even in the event of victory, some experts says the expected Israeli death toll to be as many as 100,000 is what we're saying, and it was only less than 800. So it was just amazing. Let me read also something else, because of these events, like you see what we are seeing right now, like with the embassy, the American embassy coming, and Guatemala and Nicaragua and more who wants to come, there is a shift. And we're speaking with Anna Rina. Also, she was saying, Anna Rina Heyman from the city of David, and we're seeing each other in the Knesset. And she was saying there is a shift, and we say yes, and we're like speaking together, and we could see, the events that's happening, and there is a shift, like there was a shift in '67. Now we can see a shift happening, and Israel is, first of all, not just Israel, Jerusalem is, like Netanyahu again said so clearly, Jerusalem is our capital, was our capital, will always stay the eternal capital of Israel, and there is really something now that's happening. And like in 1967 is what they were saying. It's like that the people suddenly were like, oh, we should have been again, maybe another Holocaust, and we are not, and we have the victory, and we have Judea and Samaria. And again, there was a great shift at that time. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and but there is still a cost, a human cost of lives.
Yes,
I mean,
of course.
if you go to talk or speak to people in Israel who were around at the time of the 6-Day War, particularly the elderly people, and you ask them their experience, then a lot of them are traumatized. Because
but the first week before, the people really didn't know. People were praying in the synagogue all around the world, not knowing at all. And they had the joke. They were saying, a lot of people were leaving and were obviously passing by Ben Gurion. And they said, when you are the last one, switch off the light. This was the joke, because they knew that it was like death or life. And suddenly they saw the finger of God.
Yeah, and in the Jerusalem Post, we've got a story that it says, IDF fires first warning shots at Gazans sending kites. It's something we've spoken on about the program before, but the problem of kites from Gaza, which have flammable materials and sometimes explosive devices attached to them, have been causing a great deal of problems in Israel. In the comments part of the paper, I can just get that for you and get that on the camera. It says the Palestinian Kaitifada deserves an ignoble prize, and you've got the terrorists assembling these kites below. What we're talking about isn't a child's game, but is actually a weapon used to cause damage. Fires. People can get caught in fires, children can get caught in fires, fires can cause havoc in schools, in colleges, in businesses. There can be accidents, there can be explosions. There's a miracle, talking about the miracle, that there haven't been casualties as a result. There has been severe damage in Israel.
And they are going, Netanyahu said that now, the money that they are giving to the Palestinian Authority, they are going to keep some for helping the farmers who just lost a lot of their harvest. And it's not just it was burned. Sometimes they had to cut the harvest early for not being on fire and be a danger for the population around. So it's a big thing.
The kites, it says kites have started, this is in the newspaper, it says kites have started 17 fires in Israel. Palestinian terrorists have launched multiple incendiary kites from Gaza into Israel, causing extensive damage. In one large fire near Kibbutz, near Am, firefighters worked for several hours before gaining control of the flames. In another incident, an incendiary fire caused a fire near Sderot's train tracks and train station. It's causing a huge amount of damage in the country, and Jerusalem Post said there's hundreds of arson kites outfitted with Molotov cocktails and fuel have been flown into Israel since the Hamas-led strategy was initiated, setting more than 270 fires, burning at least 6,200 acres of land. And bear in mind that there's a lot of agricultural land. Israel has its border with Gaza. So as these terrorist tactics are taking place, these Gazan kites with incendiaries are coming into Israel. They're causing a huge amount of damage. You can imagine the stress to the farmers in the region who are trying to get their crops.
And the children, they see kites. I don't know if you heard, but Sderot, which is like the city very, very close, they've done now a special summer camp for the children to do kites and bringing some good news with the kites and not these evil things. Because for the children, when they are grown up, they are discovering things, and kite has been always something like fun to do and with the wind, and suddenly for them is evil and bring terror. So they are trying to do some work in the hearts of the children, psychological help for them to do kites, and they were making some kites and sending some shalom messages on it for showing that kites can be something good.
And I think this is as well, this is just a kind of a sign of what's happening in Gaza, really, that there's this hatred, that these attacks are taking place. Also at the border, we've had the so-called Hamas March of Return, which is when the Palestinians have been marching near the border, destroying the fence, setting fires, tires on fire, these kites which have been on fire, explosive devices, live fire at Israeli troops. So really we're seeing terrorist tactics. This is not a peaceful demonstration. These are not people who are there to peacefully demonstrate, but these are people there to attack Israel, just using different tactics, really. And
again, Netanyahu was very good to speak with May about that, because she was saying, we need to help the Palestinians. And he was saying very clearly, very, straightforward, okay, what's happening right now in Gaza is not peaceful demonstration. And you have to see that this is serious and dangerous and endanger civilians on the Israel side. And people need to know that. Like, we know that, and the BBC is saying a lot of, nasty things, which is not true. And we need to counter all this news who are not true. This is violence. Now, but to go a bit further, because we don't want fight, we want, like again, what Netanyahu was saying, with words and with ideas, we can bring peace. So he was saying we are not against the Gaza people, we are against Hamas, we are against, we had also a very good program with Michael Cohen, and he was saying, okay, Israel is not attacking Syria, is attacking proxy who are in Syria with Iran. Same with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not Lebanon. Hezbollah has infiltrated Lebanon, and they are fighting this terrorist place. And the international community has to stand up and do something also about that. It's not just Israel, because we are living more in an international village, and what's happening to your country, the other country next to it is also influenced by it now.
And the thing is, whilst it's very important that you know about all the difficulties that Israel's going through and the struggle, particularly being informed about the Gaza border, there's also some very good things happening in Israel.
Yes,
And,
wait, you know what? I totally forgot to say, and when you say good things, we had some rain here in June, which never happened. And they had storm. Now, too much rain, I'm sorry to say, but like Cedrot, who just had so many kites coming, now they've been under the water, which means that you can't have fire when you have water. And it's like, again, there is a lot of people are saying different things about that, but looking at it in a positive way, you can see God's hand saying, okay, I don't want this fire on my land. And I bring my clouds. I mean, even here where we live, we had drops of rain. And we never have water usually in Israel in June.
And as well as having the rain, we've also had the historic gyro race. Now, some of you may know about the gyro race, some of you may not, but this is the Jerusalem Post. It says historic gyro race begins, and we've got the picture of the cyclists there. Well, the gyro race is I think it's basically Italian, but it's a bit like the Tour de France, where it's a competition, a world competition for cyclists. It's one of the main competitions in the world, and in a historic first, the gyro race started in Israel, had its beginning. It wasn't all held in Israel, but it had its start. The largest sporting event ever in Israel's history, the Giro d'Italia 2018, began in Jerusalem and is the first time any of the cycling world three main races, the Giro, the Tour de France, or the Volta de España, the Spanish one, will have taken place inside Israel. The race is the biggest and most prestigious sporting event ever hosted in Israel and featured four-time Tour de France champion Chris Froome from the United Kingdom. And the 21-day race started in Jerusalem and covered 9.7 kilometers there, continued with a 167-kilometer section from Haifa to Tel Aviv, and a 230-kilometer stretch from Beersheba to Eilat. The riders then left Israel and went over to Italy for the remainder of the events. Israeli Tourism Minister Yariv Levin said, "Today we are showing to millions of people the true Israel, the beautiful Israel, the Israel that's fun to travel in, and the Israel that can host one of the largest sporting events in the world." And it was an amazing time. You know, the people were able to come and enjoy the race, come to the country and see different things for the very first time. It was a massive logistical production, because you can imagine the amount of resources that were involved in it, and it cost approximately $33 million for Israel. So it was quite an expensive event, and you know, it's like everything. We all have to be supported. And if you would like to support us, if you've been watching the program today and you say, I would like to be involved in helping Israel, I'd like to be involved in helping the Israel First television program, we need your support. We currently have a project for a ministry vehicle and other projects, so please do contact us and let us know. It's because of your support that we're able to do the program today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Shalom, dear friends. We carry on the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. And do you remember in Hebrew we say Aseret Advarim. You're right. So now we look at the third one. And in English is, you shall not take the name of Adonai, your God, in vain. And in Hebrew is Lo tisa et Shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. So lashav in Hebrew means in vain, but it means also lightly, or you can say also casually, so you don't care too much. But the thing is, in Hebrew especially, also in our language, but words carry power. And so you have to understand that when we use the name of God, He's a covenant God, and He is like His character and Himself come when we call upon Him. So it's like the revealed name of the Lord can be understood as the invocation for the very presence of God Himself. And the Jewish people know that. So usually they don't use the name of God, they use the name Hashem, which means the name. So they won't say El or Elohim. Sometimes you hear in songs they will say Elohim. So it's like they just changed the name. You have also the Tetragrammaton also. You have Adonai, you have Elohe, Asher, Elohe, Shaddai, and Tsevaot. So they try to avoid to say this name because they know that the name of God is carried, He comes when we are calling upon His name. Now there is this side, but we could look also on the other hand. We know that in Zephaniah 3:9 is written that they will call upon His name again. And interesting enough, it's said there at the time that we'll use Hebrew. So we know that there is a time where we use His name, but we need to be very careful when we use the name of God. Now, another thing also, in the temple, the name of God was said only once a year by the high priest on Yom Kippur. So again, it was to show you they knew the power of the name of God, and He was coming with His presence. Now, we look at the name again in English. Now we have more understanding of this third commandment, and it's like, you shall not take the name of Adonai, your God, in vain. And in Ivrit is, we say it slowly, Lo tisa et Shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. So we've done it again today, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
So one of the things we do with the program Israel First is we teach about the Hebrew language. Natalie's done a book, The Beauty of the Hebrew Language. You can get that on the website. We've also, that's in English, we've also just published, Natalie's just published the French version. So if you're from a French-speaking country, you can also get it. Don't forget, we love to receive your emails. Email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website www.israelfirst.org, and remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.